Hey, run, Blaster! Save yourself!
No way, two can play.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. For today's video, we're going to be checking out the Transformers Studio Series 86 Core Class Steeljaw, the line's first standalone Autobot cassette to be released, which should be incredibly exciting. Although, to be honest, guys, I really can't help but feel as if though this guy's a prime example as to why maybe Core Class isn't performing so well, because I really do think as if though he could have, and to be honest, should have been an additional accessory. Now, when it does come down here to the cassette mode, whilst it isn't terrible, it is most definitely far from being perfect, especially compared alongside the likes of both Eject and Rumble. Now, in his defense, I do put that down to the pretty big difference when it comes around to both their Beast and Robot modes, but one thing which I most definitely cannot excuse would be the mismatch as we check out the paint apps. Considering that this guy is already easily one of the smallest mainline releases to date, this really does look incredibly cheap. In terms of scale, he is still exactly the same size as some of those original Micromasters, which whilst is definitely really awesome that he is still compatible with some of the more recent releases, I really can't help but feel as if though that compatibility in general is the main reason as to why he is so heavily compromised when it does come down to that Beast mode. But turning to what is easily the money shot of this form, now let's finally combine him here with Blaster. Now, one thing which I definitely did think was kind of odd is that unless you insert him exactly like that, there are some pretty big tolerance issues. So with the eject deck fully ejected, all you're going to want to do is take this here, slide it inside, and right now we are already one step closer to recreating that pretty amazing scene where both Blaster and Perceptor are under attack by the Decepticons, and this guy states, "No way, two can play." Now, when it does come down to this guy's transformation, to be honest, yet again, this is one of the many reasons as to why I do believe he should have been an accessory, because in terms of engineering, he really isn't all that complex. So for the first step, you are going to take the Beast Mode head and slide this outwards on both sides, exactly like that. We can then proceed to combine these here directly down the middle. Then what you'll do is take the entire head of the Beast Mode and slide this here backwards. You are then going to spin this guy here to the side, where we are first of all going to take a hold of these blasters and slide these here downwards. You are then going to take a hold of the front set of legs and begin to angle these down, and then what you're going to do is take a hold of that back leg and at the very same time begin to flip this blaster here forwards exactly like that. Again, guys, let's now make sure to do the same on the opposite side. So slide this blaster here down, take the front leg and slide this here forwards. Taking a hold of that back leg, we are now going to want to individually swivel forwards this pretty incredibly tight blaster until eventually you should be left with something which looks exactly like this. Now, as I'm sure you guys have already guessed, this is an incomplete Beast mode, because this is where you are most definitely going to want to bring out some of the additional accessories, which in this case would be this guy's backpack as well as those awesome wings. And all you'll need to do is combine these exactly like that, which then completely completes the Beast mode. Now, whilst there is no denying this guy looks so much better with that jetpack integrated, I really do wish that once again they could have maybe made the transformation slightly more complex and had found a way to have integrated this into the actual engineering. And bang! Now we have Steeljaw fully transformed into his Beast mode. Now, whilst this guy does appear to be fairly similar to his original character model, to kind of go back to my earlier point, this is where I really do believe that the compatibility with Blaster is ultimately this guy's biggest downfall, because I really do view it as being a double-edged sword. On one hand, it is really awesome to be able to slide this guy into the cassette deck, but on the other hand, it has resulted in an incredibly compromised looking Beast mode, which has resulted in this guy packing probably the stumpiest legs that I've seen on a Beast former in a very long time. But one thing which I did think was kind of cool from a design standpoint was how they were still able to recreate the mane of the lion by utilizing the sides of the cassette. Just make sure that you don't take a look at that head from a front-on perspective, because that face piece is looking nuts. I did think it was pretty sweet how the blasters on the side are still surprisingly effect piece compatible. In terms of the rest of the detail, whilst I may not be too keen on the whole parts forming aspect, there is no denying that without the back tail as well as these wings, this guy would have probably looked even worse than he already does. Now when it does come down to articulation, the legs are simply pinned on, so you will only be able to get these here moving backwards and forwards. The head, due to transformation, can also hinge downwards, which in its defense I have found to be kind of useful, especially for recreating some of those poses where this guy is lunging out a blaster about to rain hell down upon the Decepticons. In terms of accessories, in addition to that additional back component, there is also a much smaller version of that exact design included, so that we are able to combine that along with one of Blaster's sonic speakers. Now whilst I do definitely think this is a pretty sweet inclusion to try and justify that core class price point, considering that this guy already is super tiny and barely has any engineering packed into him, I really don't think it would have been asking too much for them to have included two to truly recreate how Blaster does appear in the original G1 show. But the whole aim of the game here is for you to combine that sonic speaker alongside the smaller backpack to give Steeljaw a full-blown weaponized mode. Now crazily enough guys, the accessory is actually bigger in comparison to the actual figure. And let's all face it, this right here will most definitely be the real money shot. So this speaker is compatible with either of the hands of Blaster, including the one which does have the pointing index finger. Considering that I've never really been too keen on this hand sculpt, personally I do like to very nicely slide this here over the top, and much like most of the weapons would appear in the original G1 show, it really does give you the impression that this has simply popped out of this guy's forearm. Another inclusion which I again really don't think would have got a miss would have been an extra blast effect. Personally, I think this looks wicked paired alongside the ones that were included alongside the Siege rung, and had they maybe brought in some blast effects, then perhaps I would have had a slightly easier time in swallowing the lack of a second sonic speaker. So, blasting our way through some comparisons, first of all we are bringing out the Studio Series 86 Eject. Now to kind of go back to my earlier point, I really do feel that in general Steeljaw would have made for a way better accessory, more so than an actual standalone release, because compared alongside Eject that was an accessory included with the Studio Series Blaster, I would argue that it is probably as simplistic as this guy, and compared alongside the likes of the Studio Series Rumble / Frenzy, it doesn't even hold a candle in comparison. This right here would most definitely be able to crack the shell and then crack the nuts inside, because this just feels way more substantial, especially in the accessory department. Because even as we bring out the Transformers Siege Ravage, who was included as part of a Micromaster $10 2-pack, I really do feel as if though this guy is incredibly comparable when it does come down to both size, plastic quality, and especially engineering. Now if you were to slash that 2-pack in half, Ravage would then cost roughly $5. So let's say this guy, because they are pretty much the same, also costs $5. You're telling me that only one of those sonic speakers alongside that tiny back compartment justifies the remaining core class price point? I'm just not buying it, and to be honest guys, instead I wish that maybe they had just included this guy alongside the Studio Series 86 Perceptor set, which is set to release next year and will undoubtedly include a second sonic speaker alongside Ram Horn. So, wrapping up on this review for the Transformers Studio Series 86 Core Class Steeljaw. When it does come down to a recommendation, to be honest guys, I am kind of split, because on one hand, if you were to judge by the past release of both Rumble and Frenzy, we know how quickly and easily some of these minions can sell out. But on the other hand, when it does come down to that Core Class price point, if you were to compare this guy alongside the likes of the Bumblebee movie Core Class Starscream, I really do think this absolutely pales in comparison. For that price point, I don't think you get anywhere near enough, especially when it comes down to engineering. At the very least, they most definitely should have found a way to have integrated that backpack into the transformation, or had instead included an additional sonic speaker so that we could have truly kitted Blaster out. I really do think it just comes down to how much you actually want this guy into the collection, because I'll put it this way, if you have no attachment to this character and really don't care about any of the cassettes for Blaster, then this is a very easy pass. I would love to get your guys' thoughts on this Steeljaw down in the comment section below. What do you guys think? I want to thank you all so much for watching, and until my next review, transform and roll out!